Hello everyone and welcome back to JB's Total Gaming, where today I have a special Christmas treat for you. The Video Game Awards of the year. Maybe the best Video Game Awards of the year. Maybe not, but maybe. And here's why I say that. I'm not going to have all these big special effects and all that stuff because I don't have the time or money to do those sort of things. But I'm going to do two special things. We're going to get right to the awards and only talk about the awards. And number two, we're going to explain why these awards won. I'm going to try to make this not just about my own personal opinion, but as best as I can be objective, explaining why games were nominated, why they didn't win, and why the games that won in all kinds of categories. If you have to decide on a AAA game to buy, help you make that decision, or tell you about some smaller indie games you might not have heard of that you may be interested in. I've always been focused on being pro-consumer for board games and video games. I'm going to try to do that with these Video Game Awards, and let's go ahead and get right into our first award. Alright everyone, our first award this year is going to be for First Person Shooter of the Year. The reason why I chose this category, I think it's a super interesting category. There's a lot of really great games and a lot of somewhat flawed games that we have available this year. And the first game we're going to talk about is Battlefield 1. So this game was a game that people were super excited about when it was announced. But I have some issues with it. See, people loved this game, and they hated Call of Duty Infinite Warfare because, well, everyone said this game looks amazing, it looks like a whole new concept, and Call of Duty just looks like a reskin in the future. Here's my thing. Yes, Battlefield 1 looks and sounds great. This studio does that, but I don't actually think this game offered all that much different than the other games. There were still automatic guns everywhere. There were some interesting ideas, but they were maybe a little underutilized, and there were some weird things in the campaign, like the human tank thing. I don't know. Overall, I do think this was a very good game. That's why it's nominated, but at the same time, I feel like this game was maybe just as much of a reskin as our second nomination, Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. So you may be wondering, really? A lot of people hated this game. A lot of people hated this game before it ever came out. They never gave this game a chance. And the thing is from really, a lot of people still, they don't like this game, but I've heard a lot of people talk about how this campaign is actually pretty good, and the multiplayer is like you expect from Call of Duty. And really, it seems pretty parallel to me as far as Battlefield 1 is concerned. Not a lot of innovation. It is a reskin, but I feel like they did almost as much innovating in the modern setting as they did in the World War I setting. So I feel like both of these games are nominated for being good-looking, good-playing, solid games that gave you a new setting without really doing too much original, which is why neither of these games won, because of lack of doing anything original. However, Doom is a game that brought something original at the same time, something old school. This is a game that told a surprisingly interesting story for protagonists who didn't really talk or didn't really care about anything that was going on. It isn't going to win, though. It came really close. This is a super tight category, and actually, any of these games, I think, are pretty solid. But Doom isn't going to win, in part because I don't think the multiplayer was that strong. It's not terrible, but it wasn't that strong. And a lot of people kind of complained that it went on a little too long. It was kind of a one-trick pony. At the end of the day, you enter a room and kill all the demons in it. The gameplay was fun, fast, visceral. It reminded you of old school, like playing Doom games, but at the same time, innovated and brought modern stuff, which is the way I think remakes of games should try to do. They either try to completely change it or make it too much like the original. They have the feel of the original while adding new things. It's a great game, and it was close to winning this year, but I just don't feel like it offered while that gameplay was really fun, there wasn't really a lot innovative in that fun gameplay, and not a fantastic multiplayer, so that's why it didn't quite win. Another game that may be a surprise on here is Shadow Warrior 2. I did a review of this game. You can check it out if you want to on my channel. This is a game I really liked. I had some problems with, though. I didn't like the loot system. I was alright with the main character. I did feel like there's a little too much dialogue before going into missions and things like that. But this game looks great. It sounds great. It plays great. You start off with an unlimited dash and double jump. You can move around the screen. The melee is pretty good. There's precision. You can cut limbs off and stuff like that. It's a really fun game to play that I feel like is dragged down by just too much loot and too much jibber jabber before going into missions, and the slightly procedurally generated feel of it does sometimes feel like you're backtracking or the game's dragging a little bit, but the gameplay itself is so fun. If you're into looter shooters and don't mind having a billion different gems that do very similar things, then this may be the game for you. So these are all games that I really enjoyed that are maybe slightly flawed, and really my winner for this year is also also the same thing. A game that I think offers a whole lot, but it's also slightly flawed. So really, I could recommend any of these games depending on what sort of gamer you are and what you enjoy. And if you enjoy kind of fast, old school movement, kind of like the Quake Arena shooters where you can have exploit and things like that to get around the map, then I think Titanfall 2 is a really great game. Titanfall 2 had a short campaign, but I feel like out of the campaigns, it gave the most bang for buck as far as time. While it was short, it was very well paced and it was interesting, and there were innovative things within the campaign that a lot of people wish had been used even more often. They were used once and they were thrown away, but it had a good single-player campaign. The reason why this game isn't perfect and it's kind of iffy as my winner for Shooter of the Year is, well, because it's actually the multiplayer that took a bit of a dip. By making the maps too open, they kind of limited what makes this game really interesting. The wall running and the jumping and all the maneuverability. I suggest checking out Super Bunny Hop. He has a great channel, and his most recent video, I believe, is about the movement system in this game, comparing it to old school movement systems. It's really interesting, and I think this game again has really great gameplay. It added the single player campaign it didn't have before, but at the same time, I feel like any of these games could have won this year, and I'd probably say Doom was also really close to that, but really, it just depends on what you're looking for. I think these are all good suggestions, and if you're interested in that kind of more complex movement system, then I feel like this is a game you might really enjoy both in the single and multiplayer campaigns, and they are adding new maps. They're not charging for those maps, which is a big thing, so I feel like while Titanfall 2 has its own issues, it is moving in the right direction, and that is why it is my Shooter of the Year. Alright, next up we have Strategy Game of the Year, and here's the deal. I don't have any set number of categories for what I'm nominating. I'm just nominating from what I feel and from what the people I respect, their opinions on gaming, all of that. I'm taking that into account and nominating as many games as I feel should be nominated. And for Strategy Game, we have 3 nominations. First, I want to talk about XCOM 2. So XCOM 2 came out way back in February, I believe, so a lot of people may have forgotten about this game. I love the original reboot of XCOM, but it had some issues. It had some major issues with performance. It had kind of a really bad final level. It had game-breaking bug that could just ruin your entire save near the end of the game. It had some real problems. Some people also didn't really like the game because they felt maybe it was a little bit too offensive oriented, where you were kind of not the bad guys, but the infiltrators this time, and there were timed missions that a lot of people didn't like, but some people did like. Overall, though, this is in many ways an improvement on the XCOM from a little while ago, a few years ago, which was fantastic, and this is a really solid game. But you can see here, if we look at the overall reviews, 78% positive. The recent reviews within the last 30 days, I believe 93% positive. So they have updated the game, and it is a really solid game. If you're not familiar with XCOM, it's a relatively simplified turn-based game. I kind of miss the old action point systems, but anyways, it is a somewhat accessible game, but also really hard, but also a lot of randomness going on where you're going in and having to take out aliens and having a lot of people in your team die if you screw up, or sometimes even just because of random things happening. It's a really fun game. I think it improves on the original while still having some issues, and those issues are why it didn't win this year. Now, a game that I nominated as well that you may not have heard about is Stellaris. So Stellaris is a grand strategy game. So we're talking really big. It is kind of a 4X space game. Explore, exploit, expand, and exterminate, I believe. Yes, it is both a board gaming and video gaming term. And Stellaris is a game that's from a studio that makes really big, complicated games like Crusader Kings. What's the other one? Europa Universalis. And these are really great games if you can take the time to really understand it. Stellaris is a little bit easier to get into, but still has a lot going on. It has some interesting stories. They're expanding the game to make the middle of the game a little bit more interesting. And if you're into complex strategy games that can get really, really big, Stellaris is a really great game. It's not even a full price game. It's a $40 game from a really solid studio. It looks solid. It plays solid. It has some interesting stories as you play and a lot of interesting decisions to make, and it came really close to winning for me this year. However, the game that won is a game that I've done multiple videos on, and that is Civilization 6. So I loved Civ 6. I personally feel like it is the best of the Civilization games on launch. I feel like the most recent games, especially 5, were pretty bad on launch, and I feel like Civ 6 was solid on launch, and Civ 6 really suits me. Stellaris almost has a little too much going on, But here's the deal. If you want more going on, then Stellaris is for you. I try to make this as pro-consumer as I can and not let my own personal opinions affect it too much. Civ 6 is my personal choice. I really liked what they added. I like the layouts of the cities, and then, figuring out where to place your districts and all the things, all the decisions they made going into Civ 6, that the changes they made, I really thought were positive, and I actually like the art style too. So Civ 6 is a game I really, really enjoyed. You can check out my videos on it. I talk about it more. I talk about if it's worth buying in my first video, and then I do a few videos of a playthrough of it. It is I'm not going to talk about it too much more. You can go check that out if you want to, but I feel like all of these games are solid, especially XCOM, now that some of those issues have been fixed. It is great if you like those turn-based tactics. I feel like Stellaris is great if you want a big grand strategy, and Civ 6 is kind of in the middle. It is a grand strategy game, but a little bit more accessible than maybe Stellaris or some of those other games by Paradox Studios is. And it's a game that, like I said, I just feel like it's solid. It offers lots of interesting decisions, and is still somewhat accessible. If you haven't played Civilization games before, I definitely suggest watching some tutorials or whatever, but it's a game where they had just improved over previous iterations of it, and that is why it is my strategy game of the year. Alright, so we've talked about two positive things. We've given two awards, so we're going to give a not-so-good award now. We're going to talk about the biggest disappointment of 2016. And the first thing we're going to talk about is The Last Guardian. Now, I want to make it clear, The Last Guardian comes in last place for the biggest disappointment. And that's a good thing, in a way. So The Last Guardian isn't necessarily a terrible game. A lot of people love it, but this is a game that was in development hell for like 10 years or something like that. This is a game a lot of people were looking forward to. Ico Studios or whatever, the creators of Ico and Shadow of Colossus, one of the most beloved games of all time. People were so looking forward to this game, and this game is beautiful. It has great animations, but it frustrates a lot of people. The game is about a relationship between this boy and this animal thing that doesn't always listen to your commands, and just gets really frustrating for some people, and also has some major performance issues. There are people who really like this game, and that's why this game comes in last and my biggest disappointment. But for this long of a wait, some people were hoping for another Shadow of Colossus, and a lot of people do feel really disappointed about this game. Now, we're talking about biggest disappointments, so we have to talk about No Man's Sky. Now, I feel kind of bad. I thought about doing a video about No Man's Sky before it came out, because I felt like I knew what No Man's Sky was going to be before it came out, but I didn't do it, so I don't have any proof that I was right about it. But this is a game that I like to call Spore 2. The reason I like to call that is, for those of you who aren't old enough to remember, there's a game called Spore a while back that came out that had this level of hype and then this level of disappointment when it came out. This is why we don't pre-order games, people. See, this is a pro-consumer channel, and I'm not saying you can't ever pre-order, but especially like a studio doing something, you don't just don't. And this is why, because No Man's Sky was disappointment. And if you don't know anything about No Man's Sky, if you didn't hear anything about it, God bless you, you're a lucky person. But this game just, yeah. But No Man's Sky is not my biggest disappointment of the year. My biggest disappointment of the year isn't about gaming, but gamers. So my biggest disappointment is the whole CSGO lottery thing, and in particular, two YouTubers, Syndicate and T. Martin, and this infamous video you can go check out if you want to. If you're not really familiar with it, basically these people were shilling for a site which you could gamble skins from CSGO that they knew kids were using, but they were talking about it like, hey, I heard about this great place, when they were actually part owners of it, and what. Real shady stuff. And here's the deal. I'm going to go to full screen here for a second and explain to you just a little message into why this is my biggest disappointment of the year. Here's my message to T. Martin, Syndicate, or any other YouTubers, streamers, or whatever who participate in shady things like this, where your whole goal is to just make an extra buck when you already are making tons of money, and you're doing it at the expense of consumers and your fans and the people who trust you. I'm a YouTuber, kind of. I don't even have 250 subscribers. My channel's been around for a couple years now. I started out making board game videos with my iPad because I loved board gaming. It was really special to me, and it is still really special to me. I'd gone through a divorce a while back, and it's one of the things that's helped me connect with my son. It's something we have special together. He's been in a few of my videos. He's really come to love board gaming too. It's a special thing, and it's something where you talk about board gaming and people are like, oh, I like Monopoly. And it's one of those things that once you get into, there's a lot of joy to be had, and I wanted to share that message. So I poured my heart and my soul into it. I don't have a ton of video editing experience. I don't have a ton of extra money to go buy programs and cameras and things like that. And I work not only a full-time job, but a job that is very often on overtime for months at a time. So it's straight. So in order to even do videos, I've never made a single penny on it. I've never run an ad. I've never asked for money. I've never grown that big. And I know part of that is, because I don't put the production value into it, because I don't invest the money into it. But there are other people that I've seen out there that, I don't know how they made it, but they have. Because one thing I've tried to do, I've tried to always be pro-consumer. I've always tried to not just give my opinion, but what I enjoy about the game. And the reason why I've shifted to doing much more video game content than board game content is, honestly, I can't afford board games right now. It's a rare occasion that I pick one up, and that's kind of why I've stopped doing it, where I can pick things up on Steam sales and things like that. And because of things going on in my life that I don't really want to get into, I haven't been able to travel to my board game group as often either, so I haven't been able to play as many board games, and I just haven't been able to do the board gaming content, and the video gaming content's easier to do just from my home. But I do YouTube videos because I want to share things with people. I want to share board games with people. I want to, and the love of board games. I want to share, indie games, little $5, $10 games that are awesome that you wouldn't know about unless you saw it on a channel. And I've spent many hours over years, and you know what? I haven't purchased Adobe Premiere. I haven't purchased special cameras because I can't afford it. If I could, if I had the money, I would, but I don't have that luxury, and I don't have the time to learn those programs. I do little crappy videos that I try to pour my heart and soul to, and try to be pro-consumer, and try to give you the best, most objective opinions that I can, and try to tell you who would like and not like a thing, because I want to share that love, because I love gaming, and I want other people to enjoy gaming too. I do this for the few people out there that watch my videos because I love it and I want to share it. And as YouTubers, as streamers, as whatever, when you've gotten to the privileged position where you're living a life that you can afford all these things, that you're making ridiculous amounts of money on the trust and love of these people, whether or not you deserve it, and then you betray those people by doing things like this, by saying, hey, check out this site that I found, while you're owning it, knowing all the while that kids are going to be gambling skins and things like that, exploiting your audience, pretending you have nothing to do with it when you're co-owner with it, or all these other scandals, and there have actually been less scandals this year than in some other years. You know what? Here's the thing. I run a fairly family-friendly channel, but this one time, I'm going to say it, fuck you. I've spent all this time, made no money because I love it. And you know what? I don't expect you to have that same level. You have put the production value into things. You have garnered the audience. You've learned how to use social media. Good for you. Great. You have earned that spot. Now respect that spot and respect your audience. So you know what? Fuck you for not respecting your fans. Fuck you for not respecting gaming as a whole and the joy it can bring by trying to exploit it for even more money when you're already in a privileged position. I'm fine with you making that money. If you've earned it, if you found a way to make it, great. But respect that you made it on the backs of the people who enjoy your content and don't take advantage of them. And that's why people like you are my biggest disappointment in gaming of 2016. Well, on that note, let's give out one more award before we end part one of this video. So, a lot of places, big award shows, they have these awards they give out, and then a few they just announce really quickly. So right now, we are going to announce Expansion of the Year, and you know what? There's no competition. Last year, The Witcher 3 was my Game of the Year, and Witcher 3 Blood and Wine may be my favorite expansion of all time. I've only ever had one expansion, and that was the Shivering Isles expansion for Elder Scrolls Oblivion, that I felt like was just a mandatory expansion you had to get, and I feel like Blood and Wine offers at least that much value, if not more. It is amazing, lengthy expansion. It changes the whole scenery and the feel of it. It's set in kind of a Renaissance, medieval, I don't know, southern France, where there's these gallant knights that are kind of silly. It brings The Witcher 3, that was a very dark game, into kind of a much more lighthearted tone while still having some serious things going on, and it offers a ton of content. It's just It's amazing. Witcher 3 is my game of the year last year. This is maybe my favorite expansion of all time. If you haven't played The Witcher, get it. If you have, get this expansion. That simple. Expansion of the year, Witcher 3, Blood and Wine. So thanks a lot for watching, guys, so far. I don't want to make the video too long, so we're going to cut it here and then do part 2. We're going to do some more awards and the game of the year. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.